Caught between family loyalty and betrayal, the truth about my brother and wife. Growing up, I never imagined that my younger brother, David, would become the person who would ruin my life. But that's exactly what happened. See, David was always the golden child in the family. From the moment we were born, he was the one who got all the attention. Our mom cooked his meals, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his schoolwork, just because we were family. And I did it without question. I didn't mind at first. I was independent, and maybe I thought it was normal, even if it wasn't fair. But as time passed, I started to realize how lopsided things were. David never helped me, and he only came to me when he wanted something. He never considered that maybe I needed help too. It was clear to me that I didn't matter as much. I was the quiet, introverted kid who loved to study, and David, well, he was loud, rough, and just like our dad. My straightforward nature didn't make things easier either. I was honest, maybe too honest, and I think that made my mom look at me differently. She loved David, spoiled him, and always seemed to dismiss me, as if my feelings didn't matter. I guess I didn't mind much at first. But things started to take a darker turn as David grew older. He began mocking me for being different, teasing me about my height, my glasses, the way I looked. He would sneak into my room and read my diary, then report back to Mom about the things I had written. Whenever I complained, my mom would brush it off, saying, "This is how brothers bond." But it wasn't bonding. It was bullying. He would even put stones in my cereal, nearly breaking my teeth, and when I told my mom, she did nothing. Worse, David sided with the bullies at school. Instead of supporting me, he called me names and encouraged others to pick on me. When I confronted him, things only got worse. The day he told me to kill myself, I felt like I was broken. I didn't think a brother could say something like that. But I didn't have anyone to turn to, because my mom didn't care, and my dad was always working. Things only got worse as we got older. David's bullying became more frequent, and I felt like I couldn't escape it, no matter where I went. I remember a time when he almost set my hair on fire. We were in the kitchen, and David, with that twisted smile of his, held a lighter near my hair. I was frozen, terrified. Luckily, my dad walked in just in time, but instead of getting angry, my mom defended David. He was just playing, she said, as if nearly burning me alive was some kind of joke. I was shocked, confused, and heartbroken. I never expected that from her. That was the moment I realized no one was really on my side. It wasn't just David's actions, it was the way my whole family seemed to turn a blind eye to it, as if I didn't matter. But then something changed. My dad, for the first time, stood up for me. He pulled David aside, and they had one of the most serious conversations I'd ever seen. My dad threatened to call the police, and I could see that David was shaken. He had never faced any consequences for his actions, and now he was finally being held accountable. I watched it all, waiting for David's usual arrogant response, but this time he was quiet. It was the first time in my life I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. My dad, the one who always seemed to favor David, had finally seen the truth. From that day on, David's behavior started to shift. For the first time, I felt like he wasn't completely untouchable. He stopped physically bullying me, but he didn't let up on the verbal insults. He would mutter "nerd" or "loser" under his breath when I was around, but now, I could see the cracks in his facade. I started standing up for myself. I wasn't that quiet kid anymore. I had been to the MMA gym, I had been training hard, and I was stronger, both physically and mentally. I could tell David didn't like it. The more I ignored his insults, the angrier he became. The tension between us was palpable. It wasn't just about physical fights anymore, it was about respect, about him realizing I wasn't someone he could push around anymore. Months passed, and despite the tension between David and me, I thought things might settle down. But I was wrong. As I got closer to finishing high school, David's behavior took a new, darker turn. He started stealing from me, pocket money I had been saving for months. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. But one afternoon, I walked into my room just as he was about to leave with my money. His usual arrogance was there, but this time I wasn't going to let it slide. I confronted him, demanding he return the money. He smirked and taunted me, saying all I could do was run to Dad. But I wasn't running to anyone anymore. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Without thinking, I punched him hard. He fell backward, stunned, and I grabbed the money from his pocket. The look on his face was almost comical. David, the golden child, the one who had always gotten away with everything, crying because I stood up to him. But that didn't stop my mom from rushing out to his aid, scolding me. "You should be a better role model for your younger brother," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. As usual, she was more concerned about David's feelings than mine. But this time, my dad didn't side with her. He asked us both to explain what happened. When I told him how David had taken my money, he was furious. "He's lucky I didn't call the cops on him," Dad said, his voice cold. Finally, David understood that this time, he couldn't talk his way out of it. David's tantrum was louder than ever. He ran to his room, slamming the door, yelling how much he hated me. But I didn't care anymore. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one being tormented. It felt like a victory. David, the kid who had always been so cruel, was the one who was punished. But the emotional toll wasn't over. David started distancing himself from me, but it didn't stop the verbal attacks. He'd mutter insults under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. "Nerd. Loser." Things were getting worse, and I realized I couldn't keep living in the same house with him. I started talking to my parents about leaving for university, desperate to escape the constant tension. The moment I left for university, I thought it would be the end of my problems with David. At first, it was like a breath of fresh air. No more insults. No more walking on eggshells. I threw myself into my studies, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe without fear of his verbal attacks. But just when I thought I was escaping, David's presence loomed over me in a different way. It wasn't just his constant criticism anymore. He started targeting my relationships. It began when I met Karen at a frat party in my second year. We clicked instantly. She was kind, funny, and we shared so much in common. When we found out she was pregnant, it felt like my world was falling into place. We decided to get married right after graduation, and our families supported us, or so I thought. That was until the truth started unraveling in ways I never saw coming. David had wormed his way into Karen's life in the most insidious way. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was polite, warm, and even started spending more time with Karen when I wasn't around. It seemed innocent enough, like he was just trying to be involved. But I was wrong. Karen confided in me later on, revealing that their relationship had become far more complicated than I ever imagined. She told me that David had started flirting with her, pushing boundaries and making her feel special when I was preoccupied with school. I didn't want to believe it at first. But as she told me more, the picture painted itself too clearly. She admitted to an affair with David, a secret relationship that spanned months. My brother had crossed a line I could never have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just from my wife, it was from the one person who was supposed to have my back. The truth crushed me. David didn't just violate the sanctity of my marriage, he violated the trust I thought I had in him as a brother. I confronted Karen, who admitted everything. She wasn't sure if the child was mine or David's. My heart sank as the reality of what had happened hit me like a freight train. My entire world felt like it was spinning out of control. The son I had raised, loved, and cared for might not even be mine. I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. After Karen's confession, my life shattered. I didn't know how to move forward, how to reconcile what I had believed for years with the painful reality that was unfolding before me. It wasn't just her affair with David that destroyed me, it was the betrayal of everything I thought I had built. I loved her, I trusted her, and she had broken me. I left her that night, packing my things while she cried on the doorstep, begging me to stay, but I had nothing left to give. I walked away from my marriage with no answers, Just the unbearable weight of a life I had built with the wrong person. I stayed in a hotel that night, and for the first time in years, I felt free, free from the pain, free from the lies. But that freedom was short-lived, because the next day, the calls began. My phone was flooded with messages from David, from Karen, from family members who were all desperately trying to get me to listen. But I knew better now. I wasn't going to fall into the same trap. I had been the one to always clean up their messes, but this time, I wasn't going to let them back into my life. The final straw came when I went to my parents to reveal everything. The truth about Karen's affair with David, the secret relationship, the lies, everything. My mother's reaction was shock, but my father, he was quiet. I could tell he had already suspected something. When I asked him what he thought about David's actions, he just shook his head, disappointment flooding his face. "This is unforgivable," he said. "You don't do this to your brother. You don't betray family like that." It was the first time I had seen my father so stern with David, and as he spoke to my brother on the phone, I could feel a sense of closure I didn't know I needed. David was caught off guard, denying everything at first, but it was clear that the truth had already come out. My father told him he was cut off, no more college funds, no more help. David's arrogance had always shielded him from consequences, but now he was face to face with the truth. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt lighter. The betrayal was still there, lingering, but at least now, I had some peace. David had lost everything, his family, his brother's trust, and most of all, his sense of entitlement. And as for Karen, she was left to pick up the pieces of her own mistakes. The hardest part was over, but it had changed me. I no longer cared to fix what was broken. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Do you think John was right to cut ties with his brother and wife, or should he have tried to work things out? Have you ever experienced a similar betrayal in your own life? Drop your comments below, I'm eager to hear what you think. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Let's get the conversation started.